discussion once the recording has also started. Okay. Can you please confirm if you can see my screen? Like I've shared a PowerPoint presentation. Can you please give me a thumbs up if you can see it? Okay. I can see people doing thumbs up. Okay. Let's start. Okay. So welcome to the domain of cyber attacks, guys. This will be a new topic. This is a post midterm topic. So in this domain, we're going to explore a range of attacks, starting from password attacks, brute force attacks, dictionary attacks. We're also going to have a look at denial of service and distributed denial of service attacks. We're going to see as well how the DNS attacks can cause problems, and then we're also going to focus on attacks that are targeted towards networks, and finally, attacks which target people, such as social engineering and phishing. So those will be the topics under this domain. So let's start with password attacks muna. So let's start with brute force attacks. As the name suggests, diba, brute force refers to trying all of the possible combinations to get and guess the password. Now, one thing that is certain about brute force attack is that given the enough time, it can really break any password in the world. However, the problem is with the time. Like, time will be of constraints na dahil ibig sabihin, it will spend much time to get the password. So for example, if your password takes 1,000 years to break, then for all practical purposes, you can consider that the password to be secured. Okay. Now there are two criteria which determines how hard it is to break the password using brute force attack. So the first one, and perhaps the most important, is the password length. Diba? I think we keep on repeating that one, like password should really be of length. So the longer the password, the harder it is to break. So for example, can you look at the illustration? If your password consists of just numbers and you're just using, let's say, 3 digits, so then it's very easy. It's very easy for us to infer, okay, and then just cycle through it, all the combinations, right from 000 to 999, di ba? Yan yung common natin na concept. So that's why you need to always select longer passwords to make them harder to break. The second important criteria is the type of characters being used. So for example, if you're just using numbers, then you just have 10 possible combinations at every digit of your password, ranging from 0 to 9. Diba? So for example, if you have, let's say, a password of double digits, and at every digit, you can select alphabets from A to Z. Okay? So then you have 26 possible combinations for every digit, right? Because here you can have A, B, C, D, and so on up to Z. So 26 possible combinations, and then again 26 possible combinations all in all. So now let's say, for example, if you have a password length of 1, then you only have 26 possibilities. If you have a password length of 2, can you look at the table, guys? Then you have 26 raised to the power of 2, and so on and so forth. So as you can imagine, the longer the password you use, the harder it is to break. Now, let's say, for example, you add numbers as well, like it's already a combination of characters and numbers. You say that you can have A to Z, but you can also have numbers 0 to 9. So then your possible combinations now becomes, it's no longer 26, but it's now 36, which makes it quite a bit longer compared to the previous one. So to increase the power of the digits or the numbers, and you should also use more combinations. So for example, you can add either, for example, an uppercase, a lowercase of alphabets. Then you'll have a 26 plus 26, that's 52 already. And then 10, so that kind of combination is really a good one. Okay, so it's always nice to select password which includes uppercase, alphabets, lowercase alphabets, and then numbers. And ideally, as we're going to discuss later, you should always add random characters as well, such as, for example, hash symbols, yung number sign, the @ symbol, to make so many combinations that they are hard to break using brute force. Okay. Now this is just the look at the numbers of the combinations that you can have. Let's say, for example, you have one-digit password. So that means you have 26 possible combinations. Then you have 26 possibilities. If you increase the number of digits to 2, then you have 677, and so on and so forth. But if you say here, for example, can you look at numbers 5 and 6? If you jump from 5 and 6, you immediately expand it exponentially. So you go to 300 million combinations to 7 digits, it now becomes billions, diba? 8 billions. And if you go for an 8-digit combination, it's already 208 billion. That's why bitaw later on, it will be mentioned na 8-digit gyud, or the 8 length character is the gold standard for creating a password. So you can imagine that, just by increasing one more digit to your password, you make it much harder to break it using brute force. Okay, am I understood? Now, we're going to discuss some of the challenges of storing some passwords. Okay, so always remember that passwords are never stored in plain text, for the simple reason that even if you consider your database to be 100% secure, you may still have a compromise of the database. And if you have all the passwords stored in plain text, then you are just doing the job of the hacker as easy as possible. Okay. Another problem sometimes is that users use the same password for multiple accounts. Am I right? Sige daw, de. Give me a thumbs up if you have done, like, for example, you have the same password in your Gmail, in your Facebook, and all your other accounts. Sige daw, de. Thumbs up. Okay. So, dagan ka nag-thumbs up, guys. Nag-thumbs up si Arabi. Dagan ka nag-thumbs up. So, ibig sabihin, if you know the password of these people in just one account, then maybe you can just crack down their other accounts. Okay. Be careful in giving your answers. Na, example, si Arabi, yung si Arabi nga thumbs up siya. So, if I just need to know your password in Facebook, then probably all of your other accounts, I can hack it as well. Pantay mo, tricky question. So, if somebody gets your password for one account, then maybe they will be able to access other accounts as well. So that's exactly the reason why there should really be some practices you need to enforce. Okay. So if you forget your password on a website or a web application, who can tell me if you will forget your password? For example, you forgot your password in a application. Yung binibigay ba nila is yung, like, for example, I will say I'd like to avail the forgot password module. Ano ba yung ginagawa nila? Is it binibigay ba nila yung password mo, or they will let you create a new password? Sige ga. Which is which? Gida, who can answer? Based on your experience, ano yung binibigay nila? Is it the dungog?
Kanang answer. Kanang ipay mo ka outro password, sir.
Yes, correct. They don't give you your old password. They let you create your old password. Here's the explanation, guys. So if you forget your password on a website or a web application, you can never actually get or see your real password because they really never stored it. Okay? You can reset your password, but nobody, not even the administrator, can see your actual password. Why? Because they're stored in hash. Okay? Because after processing, for example, they get your password, ang ginagawa nila is that they just store the hash. Okay, remember the concept of hashing, di ba? If you have the same characters, you will still receive the same hash. Munang ang i-save nila is ang hash yun, dili ang imong plain text, imong ka-password. So for example, if you will do the login authentication again, what happens is that ang ginagawa ng website is that they let you input their password in plain, but then they will still have it in hash. And then yung kino-compare nila is yung hash that is created by you doing the login process and yung hash na na-store sa database nila. It's not really the plain text. Okay? So the passwords are always hash, and the hash is stored for security. So it is impossible to recover password from hash since it's a one-way function. Remember, okay? So the basic idea is that you give it an input, and it creates a hash of that input. Okay, but there's no way to reverse the process and get the input if you have the hash. So it's a one-way function. So whenever a user enters a password, the password is hashed and it's stored. And the next time, when the user enters the password is hashed again and compared with the hash that is stored in the database. So dili gid it's not really your plain text password ang kino-compare during the authentication. It's the hash created after doing the plain text. So hash versus hash, okay? So for example, whatever password you enter, let's say, for example, for the user John, you enter the password. Now the password hash has been calculated, which would be something random like this one. And look at the illustration, okay? And then when you enter your password again, a hash would be calculated, and that hash would be compared with this hash. If the two hashes will be a match, then it's great. If it's not, then that's the time they will offer you, like for example, they'll offer a forget password module or any other means for you to get access to the web application. Okay. Now let's see two different variations of brute force attacks. We have here online versus offline. Okay, so again, brute force can be implemented either online or offline. So as you can imagine, brute force attacks don't really work very well in online because they can only make a certain number of tries after that account gets locked out. Diba? If you notice in your in web applications, ang ginagawa nila is that, for example, if you have tried to log in at least 5 times or 3 times, so if it's unsuccessful, then they will let you pause for a while, like for 5 minutes, and then that's the time you can do the login again. But it's not really like the offline that you can try multiple times. Okay? So again, your account gets locked out because even when you enter your password incorrectly on web applications, you see after a certain number of tries, your account gets locked out. Okay? So that's a built-in safety mechanism to counter against brute force attacks, and it's already widely implemented in all web applications. And also, brute force attacks are very slow online because they need to, for example, access the web page, enter the credentials, and then wait for the feedback. So it doesn't really work well. However, it would be very ideal for attackers if they can get their hands on an offline copy of the database. Diba? Now, once again, even if they have a copy of your database and that database has passwords stored, doesn't mean that the hacker has an actual access to the plain text passwords. Because as we discussed previously, almost always the password would be hashed and stored. So even if they get the hands on your database, doesn't mean that your system is 100% compromised. Now, the problem for the hacker is that he has the hash, but he doesn't know the password. Okay, so one possible way is that they try different combinations of passwords. They pass it through a hash function, and then they try to check if the generated hash matches the hash stored in the database. Now, this is a very slow process, but it guarantees good answer. Now, it makes it very hard now to speed things up, and then attackers often use something which we call now a rainbow table. Okay, so what is this rainbow table? So what it does is that they have all the possible password combinations. Let's say you're talking about 5-digit passwords, right? So they have all the possible combinations for 5-digit passwords, and what they will do is that they have a pre-computed, they have pre-computed all of the hash, and then what they will just try to do is that they will just compare. So now their only job is to compare those hashes they will compare those hashes with the hashes stored in your database so that they don't have to actually compute the hash again. Yan yung rainbow table. Ibig sabihin, attackers have that kind of database already. So we know that it takes up either time and space. That saves up but using rainbow table saves up a lot of time of the hacker. They don't need to compute the hashes again. The hashes are now pre-computed, and of course, they stored it in the rainbow table. So this makes their attack more effective and more dangerous. So this really happens. That's why that's why it's really a good practice, diba? Pag 5-digit lang siya, medyo mabura kasi na siya, diba? So usually good, again, increase the length of your password. Okay? Now, we also have here what you call dictionary attacks. Another interesting variation of password attacks. The problem with brute force, just like what I have mentioned earlier, is that they are not really what do you call this one? They are not feasible. Ibig sabihin, it would really take them time and of course the resources of the attackers. So in the dictionary attack, you do something more intelligent. Okay? You try to play on human psychology. Okay? Ito naman, it's just like it's kind of doing some guessing game. Okay? And you try the words in the dictionary because often people tend to use these words. Another interesting thing is that people often select common patterns of passwords. So a dictionary attack includes both trying words in a dictionary as well as these common words. Now, based on the research, these are the top 10 most common passwords. Can you look at the most common passwords? A simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a QWERTY, the password no word. You have a 11111. You also have ABC123, and of course, all of these kind of passwords. And there are a lot of people who still, use these passwords. Aminin natin yan. So there's a very high possibility of discovering a password in a shorter amount of time with the brute force. The problem is that you have such a big search space that you try to have billions of combinations. But in a dictionary attack, a dictionary eventually is still limited with the number of words. And of course, the common password patterns are also limited. So the hacker has a good chance of stumbling upon a weak password using a dictionary attack compared to the brute force attack. Okay? So usually, if you have a weak password, yung kontra ninyo is yung dictionary attack. Diba? Like for example, ito, another also observation I have. Usually, people, yung ginagawa nila is that kung ano yung pangalan ng laptop nila or yung computer bitaw, yan yung ginagawa nilang password. Diba? So I do hope hindi niyo yan ginagawa. Okay? Now let's have a look at some of the best practices for protection against password attacks. So again, when we talk about brute force attacks, one thing which your web application should definitely have is a lockout. So ibig sabihin, if you're trying to develop a web application, always include a lockout. So after a number of unsuccessful attempts, your account should automatically log out or it should have a lock yun. You should never really allow for brute force attacks to carry on without any sort of locking out. Another important concept that is after a certain number of incorrect tries is that you should force the users to pass through a CAPTCHA. So for instance, Google offers reCAPTCHA. I think they have free versions for this one. It's a very interesting combination because the idea is that you put a challenge on the screen which the user has to solve and only the humans can solve. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Because sometimes these brute force attacks and then dictionary attacks, it's no longer carried out, like it's not carried by humans itself na. Like they try to create robots or bots for this one. Ibig sabihin, yung gumagawa ng brute force, it's no longer with human intervention but with automations na. Okay? That's why CAPTCHA is being implemented. Now, doing a brute force, you have it here. With reCAPTCHA, yung ginagawa nila is that you're putting the user onto a challenge on the screen, which the user has to solve and only the humans can solve it. So previously, this is a bit more difficult. And then as technology improves, they used to be characters which you have to type and or maybe just identify the pictures. That's the previous version. Now, we still have that, but Google has introduced a new version of CAPTCHA in which you just have to click once. Okay? And how do they check whether it's a human or a machine or a robot? Doing a brute force is the way you move your mouse within that screen. So they captured the movement of the mouse. And usually, if the movement of the mouse is quite perfect, automatically, it will be detected as a robot or a bot. Diba? Because usually, pag humans talaga, hindi talaga perfect yung mouse movement natin. Okay? Another interesting, so again, only the purpose of reCAPTCHA, yung CAPTCHA bitaw na implementation, is that they try to identify how humans move the mouse and the pattern. They can then detect whether it's a human or it's a robot. Another interesting, or perhaps the most important thing, is to enforce good password policies. Yan yung talagang, kumbaga, on our end. Okay? So you should make an IT policy and enforce it in your organization, which make sure that your password should be relatively long. So again, di ba kanina I mentioned na you have 300 billion combinations. If you have a 8-length password because it's already the gold standard. Okay, so 8 characters is the gold standard of password policy. This should be the least length of your password because with 8 characters, you have a huge number of possibilities, not really easy to break. Okay. Another important thing is that you should always include both uppercase and lowercase characters as well as special characters. Now, this increases the search space because at every digit, you now has 26 plus 26 plus the special characters pa yun. So a bigger space. You can always add numbers, of course, pwedeng ganyan. And another important thing to make sure is that you should always encrypt your databases. So the password is already hashed and stored in the database, but you still need to encrypt the database itself as well as because, you know, even if your database gets compromised and you have used a state-of-the-art encryption scheme, it would be really hard for the attackers to break that database. Okay, those are just some of the common practices that you need to do. Now, let's discuss another thing that's also another practice kumbaga on the back end. Let's discuss about salting. Salt, kumbaga. It's a very interesting technique to counter brute force attacks. So if you recall, one of the most effective ways that hackers crack password was that they get the hands of an online, not online, but offline copy of the database, and then they use this rainbow tables because, you know, the database doesn't have an actual plain text passwords. It just has the hashes of the passwords. So what they use, so what the hackers use usually is that they have these rainbow tables, which they have a pre-computed hashes of all the passwords. So now their job is very simple to compare this pre-computed hashes with the database stored in the data, yung mga hash bitaw na stored sa database ninyo. They don't have to compute the hash again and again. So one way to solve this problem is to use salts. So a salt is a random number which we add to the password before hashing it and storing it in the database. So technically speaking, if you will implement salting in your password authentication or password creation, hindi yung user ang magbibigay ng salt, but rather it's the system. It should be a random number. So this makes reportable attacks ineffective. Okay, so a salt again is a random number which we add to the password before hashing it and storing it in the database. Let's see how it works. So basically we have the password, okay, and then we add the salt, random salt to it, and then we do a one-way hash function, which is, you know, the final hash is stored in the database. Now, since the hash is not just a simple hash of password, it is also includes the salt in it, okay? So this makes it very difficult for the attacker to get the original plain text password. So for example, even if we correctly guess the original plain text password, he won't be able to check whether it's the correct one or not because he wouldn't have access to the random salt, which was added when hash was created. So this adds significantly security to the passwords. Now, one question being asked on me is that, sir, if this will be added on the creation of the password, how does it now being authenticated? So usually it happens on the back end, okay? Like the way you add salt bitaw on the password is also the way you will remove the salt on the password authentication pod gyapon. You don't save it on the same database or the same bitaw na column because, of course, if they get a hand of that copy, then definitely it will be easy for them to do the brute force attack. So again, ang ginagawa ng iba is that they include the, what they call this one, the salt on that password, and then they have a module for password authentication that will remove the hash. Like, yung ginagawa is that they try to have it on one particular index. Okay, for example, they have it on the first 3 index of the password, yan yung salt. Others have it on the middle. Others have it on the last part or the last index of the password. Yan yung mga common na practice in salting. But of course, that's very dependent on the developer. Okay? So still, the process of authentication for login does not really compromise if, or it's not being compromised if salting is being implemented. Okay? Do you have question for password attacks? Gidode? Meron mang question before I proceed? Kung wala, give me a thumbs up, guys. Wala ko nakitang thumbs up lagi. Ayan, di na nag-thumbs up noon. Okay, very good. Now let's go to the next one. We have here DOS and DDoS. So in this lecture, we're going to discuss two important cyber attacks, the denial of service and the distributed denial of service. So let's start first with the denial service attack. Denial of service attack. So a denial service attack is any attack which causes services to be either slow or unavailable to legitimate users. Again, kindly take note of the word legitimate users. Ibig sabihin, sila yung mga users that are only capable or allowed to use the web application or the system. Now, this includes examples such as, for example, crashing the web or database servers so that the users are no longer able to access them. You can also cause overloading of the web or the database servers through bogus requests, or you could choke the network bandwidth through bogus traffic such as we saw, ping traffic. Okay, yan yung pinaka-common. You can send thousands of frivolous ping messages to choke the network bandwidth, but the basic aim really is the same, either to deny a legitimate service to users or to make it slow so that it becomes infeasible or impractical to use. Now, denial of service attacks usually originate from one single source or IP address, and that is why they are easier to detect and block. You could just simply add rules in your firewalls which block that malicious IP address. However, there is another variation of denial of service attack, which is what we call DDoS, or distributed denial of service, in which case you have attacks from multiple IP addresses simultaneously, and this type of attack it's much more complex and harder to stop. So in the denial of service attack, can you look at the first illustration? The attacker sent a flood of packets such as pings or bogus TCP requests in order to overwhelm the network. So if we see the diagram, what happens is that we have a legitimate users accessing a web server. But this, can you look at the red one? But this malicious attacker is sending fake messages in bulk in order to overwhelm the web server. Now, denial of service attacks are easier to detect and block because they originate from a single IP address. So you could just detect it and blacklist that IP address and add it in your security tools to block it. In contrast to the other one, can you look at the second illustration? In contrast, in a distributed denial of service attack, you have multiple IPs which are used simultaneously to launch the attack, and they are much harder to block. So for example, if you have attacks coming from different IP addresses, it would be very difficult to detect and block all those IP addresses. So perhaps the biggest challenge is how to differentiate your legitimate users from fake users, because you will always have legitimate users who are also accessing your web server. And it's very hard to differentiate between the two, whether it's a genuine IP address or is it part of a big network which is attacking your web server. So this is actually an ongoing research. So we have, an advancement in both sides, from attacker side and of course from the defense side as well. But generally speaking, this type of attack is not very easy because not only the IP addresses are different, they are also dispersed around the world. Yan yung medyo mahirap pag DDoS na yung kinakaharap natin. Another related concept is what you call the bots and botnets. Now, hackers are usually secretive people. They don't want their original IP addresses or sources to be revealed. So what they do is that they hack a number of systems on the internet, and then they create a network of these bots, and then they exploit these bots to launch attacks on the destination or the victim. So in this way, not only they hide their identities, but they also have a very scalable attack. So they can have thousands of bots in their network and launch attacks. So the basic idea here is that a malicious software is installed on the PCs and servers, and then these systems become bots or robots. And so basically this network of bots is controlled by the hacker. And so basically he sits behind the scenes, he hides his identity, and still uses an army of bots to launch the attacks. The way it works is this. So the hacker, he basically hacks different systems, This is usually done through, for example, installing malware, which delivered through emails, or users visit malicious websites which have links in which they happen to install malware. Okay, so often the users are not even aware of it, and the malware opens back doors, and whenever the remote commander or the hacker sends instructions, this system will then launch attacks on their destination. Now, this type of attacks is dangerous because, first of all, the identity of the hacker is unknown. So even if you're able to trace your attack to a bot, the identity of the hacker would still be hidden. Secondly, this type of attacks are scalable. Ibig sabihin, like, pwede mong gawing, like, you can upsize the number of it. So it's uncommon to have thousands of bots in your bot network. So this attack is very scalable, and it can bring down even powerful servers. That's one of an example. So threats, we have here the results of denial of service caused by bots or botnets, which are technically considered as severe. So the first could be the loss of service to your legitimate clients, and this is bad for your business. It may result in a loss of service to your employees. Ibig sabihin, they cannot access the web application. Okay, so if your server is down, your employees may not be able to log in and carry on with their regular activities. And then obviously, all of these results will be in a financial loss. So Kaspersky, a very famous antivirus company, did some research, and they said that in an average denial of service attack causes a damage around $1.6 million to companies who are being targeted on this one. Another important result or threat or damage being done as well by botnets is that the reputational damage. I mean, even if there's a significant financial damage, or if you are a big corporation which can, absorb financial loss, even then you'll have a reputational damage, because knowing it that you've been with that kind of attack, people may no longer trust the security of your systems, and of course, they will prefer other companies who offer the same service, diba? So again, you have legitimate clients will not have access. We have the loss of service to employees. We have financial loss, and of course, your reputational damage. So how do you protect against distributed denial of service attacks? One way is to use load balancing in a distributed denial service attack. So how does it work? So you have malicious traffic. You have malicious traffic coming from so many different IPs and sources. So what you can do is that you can increase the capacity of your backend. Ibig sabihin, dadagdagan mo. You can increase the number of servers so that your backend is also scalable, and of course, it can handle additional load. So now, instead of all of the attacks focusing on one server, multiple servers are going to take off the load, and they're going to distribute the load. Okay? And this provides some sort of cushion, like mura siyang temporary bitaw na solution to the problem or to the organization on its initial reaction to the attack. Now, eventually, your backend has still limited scalability, right? So if it's a very big attack, it will still eventually overwhelm your network. But technically speaking, you get a cushion or a temporary solution in which you can devise a counter strategy if it happens. And still, it is much better than having a single point of failure. And one server which fails and bring down your corporate network down, compared to load balancing, you can still have a temporary solution. So another way to detect distributed denial of service attack is through patrons. Ano ibig sabihin ng patrons? So basically, we can observe any abnormal behavior using different techniques such as machine learning. Ito na yung mga common na ginagamit ng mga nasa cybersecurity na field. But before you detect an abnormal behavior, you first have to define what is a normal behavior. So basically, normal behavior is determined by observing the traffic patterns in your network. For example, a very simple normal behavior could be that on an average given day, for example, your corporate network receives, say, 5 gigabytes of incoming traffic and then 10 gigabytes of outgoing traffic. So, in yung observation mo. So, if you see someday that you're going beyond or you've observed a 100 gigabyte of traffic which is outbound, then obviously this represents a deviation from the normal one that will now be considered as an abnormal. And similarly, you can have many other statistics. For example, you usually receive your traffic from certain parts of these regions of the world. But if you see a lot of traffic from a new region of the world, then this can also be a trigger. Diba? That's also an observation. So that's how you define normal behavior. And based on that, you can detect abnormal behavior. So usually an abnormal behavior is detected from the logs of the web applications. For example, this could be a sequence of web pages access. So again, let's say, for example, you know that the normal users, they access, they go to the home page, then they go to a certain page and so on. But you detect a pattern which is usually or totally unintelligent or something like weird or strange. And you see lots of, users or IPs accessing your web application through that particular pattern, then it can also be an abnormal behavior, okay? Another example, which is really good, is that the time spent on web pages. So for example, you know that, or you have already a report na an average user spends, say, for example, 15 to 20 seconds on your login screen. But then you happen to detect that there are users who are spending, let's say, 1 hour or 2 hours on your login page. Then that is also a deviation from the normal behavior. Another could be the request rate. So obviously, the number of requests you receive per minute or per day is another telltale sign that could be if remote users are trying to access certain ports. So for example, you know, yung telnet bitaw port 23 is insecure. Let's say, for example lang, and then similarly, you have HTTP port 80 is also insecure. So normally, all of your remote shell should be through port 22 on SSH. And for web applications, you should be using 403. Diba? Yan yung sa network. I don't know if you know that one sa networking. So if anybody is trying to access these vulnerable ports, then this could also be a sign that someone is also trying to attack your network. Another important fact is that the correlation of traffic from the different geographical regions, say you receive 90% of traffic from Asia, and now you detect that you're receiving 90% traffic from Europe suddenly, then it is also a deviation from something that is normal. So the key point being is that you have to define really good the normal behavior, and then based on that, you can detect the abnormal behavior. Another characteristic which could be used to make this differentiation is the packet types. Okay, so for example, you should only receive a limited number of, let's say, TCP sync messages, which are always sent when you are when a client is initiating connection with your web servers. So say in a day you receive 1,000 TCP sync messages. Even if you receive, say, 1,500 or 2,000, I think that's still okay. Diba? Kaya that's within the range. But if you receive 20,000 TCP sync messages, then suddenly, or this means that there is maybe some sort of distributed denial service of attack going on. Now, please keep in mind, you can have legitimate situations in which you have these deviations, but it doesn't really mean that it's always genuine. Okay, again, we are only basing it on our observation baya. So you have to be on high alert, and you have to employ your security tools to dig further in and detect if it's a distributed denial of service or just really a normal behavior. And that's one really challenge, to differentiate legitimate users, legitimate traffic patterns from, illegitimate traffic, which is trying to detect or to destroy your network. So again, define nyo muna yung normal. You do some observation, define the normal, and of course, you identify na dayon which are the abnormal behavior. Of course, from the data coming from your logs. Okay, you cannot just say mangyod na, I have observed it just once only. Okay, so a one-day activity log cannot be considered as a basis. It should really be like a time frame, like a time duration. For example, 1 week or maybe a month na activity logs para you can really determine the trend and the pattern of this kind of behavior. So another interesting technique is to use IP block listing. Okay? This a block ka but black nga black gid siya gid. So you can check the reputation of suspicious IPs and add them to your firewall rules in order to block them. Now, there are several sources from where you can get this list of IP addresses. First of all, you would be in your list, build up yourself for your own corporate network based on the traffic patterns that you have observed. But there are also other sources. So for example, there are threat intelligence, IP blacklists for known botnets and reflectors, and you should definitely consider adding them to your own blacklist because, you know, the point being that you don't need to be attacked by each of these. You know rogue elements, and only after that you have to add them to your firewall rules. So again, there are already existing lists of what we call this one, botnets, and of course reflectors. And sometimes it pays off to be a bit proactive and, you know, keep on contact with the latest threat intelligence IP blacklist and add them to your security tools. Sir, is this blacklist from the outside free? Yung iba free, yung iba nagpapabayad sila because they do research baya and digging on this one. Like they try to identify whether this IP is creating botnets or doing some DOS or DDoS. Okay, so remember, some of the challenges in blacklisting, particularly on IPs, is that obviously IPs are dynamic, so they change all the time. So it's not like there are IPs which will be fixed for several years. So it's always a fluid kind of list. You know, IPs are being added, IPs are being changed, and if an attacker suspects that his botnet has been detected, obviously he may know or move it to another different address and so on. IP spoofing is also another problem. They may spoof a legitimate IP address which belongs to legitimate sources, and, you know, clients and servers, and you may think they're coming from legitimate users, whereas they are not, diba? Another problem is obviously yung false positives. You may erroneously blacklist genuine IP addresses. Ito yung medyo nakakatawa kasi nga na-add nyo yung, instead na they're genuine, they now become false. So you have to be a bit careful on how your blacklist is being composed. So this is something which is an ongoing activity, and it's not a one-time task. It has to be, you know, reviewed periodically and updated. Okay? So again, IP blacklisting is a good practice, but it needs sources from outside. You also have your own observation, and of course, it should be reviewed from time to time. So another powerful technique to prevent distributed denial of service, which is widely being used today, and of course, it's now a growing business, not only in the West, but also in Asia. Okay, so a lot of companies, they don't have the time and then the resources to invest into, for example, their own in-house security teams. So they use the content distribution network, such as, for example, Cloudflare. Again, ang tawag dito is cloud-based content distribution networks. Okay, so what they do is that they offer protection against distributed denial of services by using several techniques such as load balancing and then detecting attacks and blocking them. So the traffic doesn't really go directly to your network. So kindly consider this example. So this is your corporate network, itong nasa blue na area, yung nasa cloud, kumbaga. And this is the public internet. And these are your users, or they may include, you know, attackers. So now, instead of the end user traffic going directly to your corporate network, it goes to the third-party solution where it checks for any problems, such as any patterns or distributed denial of service attacks, and Cloudflare and similar solutions. They also provide some sort of load balancing. So they provide some sort of elasticity into your solution to absorb some sort of, you know, peak loads. Okay. And once the traffic is cleared, it is passed on to your corporate network. Now, this type of third-party solutions, they make your job easier because, you know, you're kind of outsource them. And then a lot of your security features, you don't have to worry about denial of service or DDoS and so on and so forth. So, ang ginagawa nito is that instead na kayo yung gagawa ng solution for DOS and then DDoS, ipinapasa nyo doon sa cloud-based content distribution service provider ninyo. An example for that one is Cloudflare. So ang ginagawa ni Cloudflare is that they try to filter out whether this particular traffic is a good one or is it a bad one. So they have their own technology, they have their own mechanism. And of course, those who pass their kind of filtration will only be, or this will be the IPs that will only be allowed to your corporate network. Okay? So ibig sabihin, lahat ng problema sa traffic, doon na kang Cloudflare. Hindi na sa network ninyo itself. Okay? Am I clear? So that concludes the lecture on our denial of service and distributed denial of service. Do you have any questions, guys? Sige, Dobe. Do you have a question? Kung walang question, kindly please give me a thumbs up. Okay, walang question. Ang galing. So, by next week, I will be providing a Google form quiz, a short quiz about this one. I will also be providing you the recorded lecture maybe tomorrow or maybe by the end of the week. Okay? So can I request everyone to please turn on your camera for our documentation? Okay. Ako lang yung naka-turn on yung camera. How about the others? Okay. In the count of 3, you smile, guys. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you all next week. Okay? Thank you.